Broadcasting. Recording. Hi, everybody. We're just waiting for people to join on. Thanks for being so prompt and on time. We'll get rolling in just a few minutes. If you can hear us and see us, let us know in the chat where you are dialing in from tonight. Ooh, Florida. I'm a little bit jealous. I'm in Wisconsin, North Carolina, Michigan. There's my Midwest people. Minnesota. Awesome. North Carolina. Kinsey, are you in Oklahoma or are you in Wisconsin? I see Kinsey's on. Oklahoma, Alabama. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Look at all these people also having an exciting Thursday night with us. All righty. Okay. Do you want to get rolling, Ashley?
Sure.
All right. Do you want to get started with any welcome message or you want me to roll along?
I just want to thank you for including us in this webinar, and we greatly appreciate you and all that you do for Lighthouse.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you guys who are joining us tonight to be here. We're here to talk a little bit about how to build a culture of achievement and accountability. And it's funny because those two words actually go together more than I think we realize sometimes, and that it's hard to help teams really feel a sense of achievement without first having an environment of accountability to help those standards be met. So a little bit, oh, my slides going here. A little bit about me. I'm Jetta Poppy. For those of you who don't know me, I have been around dentistry for quite some time, and I've done everything in the industry from dental assisting to actually ultimately owning and managing a 7-location dental practice in Wisconsin. And so I've got a lot of expertise in dental operations and people development. I am an enthusiastic change agent, which not everybody loves about me all the time. You can ask some of the people in the chat who work with me. And I'm also an EOS implementer, which means I've done a lot of training at implementing something called EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System, a system really designed to drive a lot of accountability and a lot of progress and success. And I do that mostly with dental offices or companies around the dental space. So I want to spend tonight and kind of share with you the things that I've learned in that experience and give you some tips and some tools that hopefully you can take back to your practices tomorrow, or hopefully you have tomorrow off and you can take them back on Monday. So really what I always like to ask people when we're talking about accountability, and a good place to see it is in your people. So if you look around your organization, is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? Or do you maybe, like a lot of us, have sort of meeting after meeting where we make requests, we come to agreements, but then those things don't really stick. They don't really gain traction in your organization. And we kind of cycle back to sort of the same patterns and same behaviors, because those are, you know, the behaviors we see when we are lacking some accountability. And just to clarify, a lot of times that accountability we're lacking isn't just the idea of, you know, we don't listen to our boss, but sometimes an accountability is really more an indicator that we don't even feel accountable to each other. And that's actually really where you get a lot more healthy and a lot more results when we can drive a sense of feeling accountable to one another instead of just feeling like we have to do this so we don't get in trouble. So if you, like many people, are suffering a little bit in people issues or just a lack of making things stick in your office, hopefully tonight will be really useful to you. When we have a lack of accountability in our teams or in our organization, it not only limits our productivity and our results as a business, it doesn't just hinder what we can accomplish in any week, month, or year, but really more than that, or equal to that, is it really hurts our culture. It's really hard for people that work in an environment where accountability isn't a strength, because the reaction is usually one of two things. We go to a place of real complacency, which doesn't really drive high performers or happy people, or people who feel very inspired by their work, or very motivated by their work. Or it drives managers crazy, and then we go into cycles of overmanagement, or some of us might call it micromanagement, which also feels very negative and can drive a lot of turnover, and in and of itself doesn't necessarily produce more results. And so if we can come up with a way to address accountability in our organization and do it in a way that hopefully doesn't feel too much like conflict, because that's always an uncomfortable thing in the dental world, but really feels more productive and more helpful and supportive of those around us, then we can really get a lot of things done in a dental office without feeling like we're working a whole lot harder. And just so you guys know, if you have questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'm very happily interrupted and would love to make sure that I'm addressing your specific questions and most helpful to the people who are joining me and giving me their time tonight. So don't hesitate to interrupt me or drop those in the chat. It also helps me know that you're there with me. So we know that a lack of accountability can limit our results, but it also really hurts us in the people department, and that people just don't feel very accomplished or very rewarded in an environment where accountability doesn't exist. And they also don't develop a lot of respect for each other or a lot of job satisfaction, right? And really high performers won't stay in that type of environment because they won't tolerate a place where some people have to do the things that they say they're going to do and other people can just slide. And so really the thing I would want you to know is that while accountability can feel like a thing that we avoid because it feels a little bit like calling people to task or getting on them, that's really not what it comes down to. And when we can take brave steps into discussing outcomes and holding people accountable to the things that they agree to do, really you produce not just happier individuals, but happier teams and more results. So if you kind of think about, not to make it this extreme, but sometimes we fear that initial resistance, sort of like when Super Nanny comes in and the kids are being a little out of control and she consistently puts them in timeout until they feel accountable for their behavior. Initially, there's crying, there's pushback, but she's in it enough to know that right past that, there's kids who are happier and who feel more secure and who feel ultimately more satisfaction with their accomplishments, big or little. And that's really not that different in managing a team. So, we have a lot of tools around us that can help us drive accountability, right? We have ways to do it for ourselves. And a lot of us have tools like dashboards, and Lighthouse has this example of the accountability report. And sometimes we're just not aware of those tools we already have, or we don't really know how to take them and use them and have conversations around them. Or they're so automated and we've been looking at them so long, sort of in a state of just, survive the day mode, that we're not really taking from it what we could. But this one from Lighthouse is a good example. I don't know if any of you guys have Lighthouse, but if you do, make sure you turn on this report, because this gets auto emailed to you the following morning, right, Ashley?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a daily recap of the previous day's activities and shows you areas that need attention that you may have missed.
Right. And I think it's good to see, like, if you're an office manager or a doctor who counts on maybe a person other than yourself to be doing these tasks, like updating of patient information at the check-in seat, being able to see that this happened or didn't happen, without having to watch or observe a person all day to make sure it's happening is really helpful. And it's also helpful to be able to take a tool like this, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but having something that's objective data, right? Rather than I feel like you're not doing this. It's a little easier to go to a person and say, it looks like we're still missing some of these, what can we do about this? You can have a productive conversation, and it doesn't put them in a place where we can debate or where we have to defend. It's simply a what is. It's a black and white objective situation that we can troubleshoot together. And it's just a tiny example of how we can approach this a little bit differently. Are there other tools like this or other things that we can point to in Lighthouse that you can see as an opportunity to drive accountability?
Yeah, so we actually also email a daily task list every day that's also available in the Lighthouse portal that scans what you need from patients. It could be contact information, recall information, some health forms, or even birthdays that can help front offices as well.
Right. Oh, that's right. The task list. So we can have the information available to people, and then we have a system here that lets us know how we did with that information that was available to us, right? Because that's a frustrating example of it, right? We can put, and that's not the only example of that. There's lots of softwares out there that have morning huddles or that provide reports that show us, in a very tangible way, all the opportunities walking in our door. And yet we don't always seize those opportunities, and we can kind of day over day say, oh, we tried, or we were busy, or we pretty much do it. But when we can also demonstrate in a measurable way that actually we had the information and we didn't do something with it, that as a manager or owner, you can take that and actually have problem solving type conversations around it, rather than I suspect this may or may not be happening type conversations, which don't usually lead to, firm solutions.
And I can share a link to an article we just did about daily huddles in the chat for everyone as well. So I will find that.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So the Lighthouse Daily Huddle, or just generally like daily huddles?
Just general daily huddles and how they can help the office.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're not having a daily huddle at this point, please read that article, because we really should be discussing those opportunities every single day. So getting into some additional tools or additional systems and things available to us in this industry or in any industry is this tool that I came across quite some time ago and have been working to implement in dental offices for a handful of years now. And it's really been a game changer in terms of shifting that culture to one of progress, one of getting things done, one of feeling focused and good about our results, is something called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I did not invent this system. It's outlined in the book Traction by Gino Wickman. It was not invented specifically for dental, but I can tell you, because most dental offices are entrepreneurial businesses that are sort of small to mid-sized businesses, the system works beautifully for dental offices. So if you don't have a copy of this book, definitely get one, or hit me up. I have a couple of options to get you a copy. I'll give you my contact information at the end here, or put in the chat if you're interested in reading it. Or if you've read it, if anybody's read it, let me know. If I have any EOS fans in the group. But basically, this is a system designed for people who don't necessarily come from a long, big management background, which is really what we are as dental businesses. We're clinicians. We come from being assistants or treatment coordinators or hygienists into management, or dentists for that matter, into sort of managing teams and businesses. And we don't necessarily come with all of these skills under our belt. Oh, Amanda loves EOS. I will happily talk EOS with you anytime. So I'm going to share with you guys some of my favorite tools and some of the favorite concepts from this book that really can sort of drive this and change this in your culture. I'm going to start with just sort of quickly covering what the EOS model is, so that there's a little bit of context around these things. And then please chime in with any questions that you want along the way, because I really would love for you guys to feel like you can utilize some of this stuff when you're done here tonight. So the EOS model starts with your business in the middle, or your practice in the middle, and it breaks the the model is broken down into 6 key components of a healthy business. The first component being the vision component, meaning does everybody in your organization clearly understand the vision, right? What are the values of the practice? Where are we heading? Are we all rowing in the same direction? And EOS does that by really working through with the leadership team to answer 8 questions and then giving us the systems to crystallize that vision for our organization. The second component is the people component, because every great vision needs great people. And the thing is that great people are not a universal thing. What you need are great people for your vision, right? There's different right fits for different right seats in all different practices. And when you can kind of clarify what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what's important to you from a values standpoint, and then we can identify the structure or the right seats in your organization, then we're in much better shape to put the right people in them. Right people, right seat on the bus. Yes, exactly. It's a little tougher than it seems like it should be sometimes. And funny enough, a lot of times it comes down to us not even having right seats. Like we don't even have the right seats to make our bus go. And so that's a little bit of an underutilized consideration when it comes to people. A lot of dental offices actually just get busy and then hire more people to help with the busy, and without a lot of definition or clarity around what those additional people will help us accomplish. And see that over and over again. And so we don't feel like the new people actually changed our situation, because they didn't. The next component is the data component. And in EOS, there's a couple tools there, but basically the idea is that we look at our numbers a little bit differently, and our team members understand the measurables of their performance. So we use something called a scorecard to measure our data that allows us to look at data in trends and become predictive around data and to become actionable around data. We use it to flush out issues, we use it to fix things, and we take a little bit more of a, not a little bit, quite a bit more proactive approach to data in an EOS practice versus how we typically look at numbers in more of a reporting fashion in dental office. Oh, looks like Jeanette is raising her hand. You're definitely open to your questions. Oh, look at, can you see what, are there questions coming in on the raised hand? Can you manage those for me, Ashley?
I do not see any questions in the Q&A.
Okay. You know what, you guys, sometimes that raised hand thing, if you can just put questions right in the chat, that's probably going to be the easiest way for me to answer your questions. If you throw them right in the chat. Because I'm happy to answer them, but I don't. Here we go, Q&A.
Oh, Jeanette just said, got it.
Got it, okay, perfect. So the next component is the issues component of any business, and all businesses have issues, right? Actually, much of our day is stomping out issues all day, every day. What we do a little bit differently in this model is that we have a system to flush out issues, and then we learn some skills to productively discuss them, move them to solutions, and solve them more permanently rather than operate as the sort of professional firefighters that we sometimes become in the dental office. And then the next component is process, so that our processes are documented and followed by everybody. However, we do that a little bit different in the EOS model than we typically do in a dental office, where we're documenting things like turning on lights and turning on computers, and we put such detail into our process that it's impossible to manage to them and get everybody operating consistently. So what we do is we actually document the processes that are essential and fundamental to our business operations, the things that have to be done the same way. And we learn to document them very simply, very high level. And then the final component is that traction component, which is really brings us all down to the ground. It's that missing piece where we feel like we just can't, we have good ideas and we just can't get things done. We just can't make it stick. And so in that traction component, it's really a couple of key things. One, we set 90-day goals that we call rocks. So that gives us some focus. And then we implement a meeting pulse, or a weekly meeting, that allows us to really stay on track and really stay accountable to the things that we've said matter, and hold each other accountable week to week, and support each other week to week to stay on track and never let anything get too out of control for us. And the results that it drives are really just remarkable. So I'll get going into a couple of examples of these things here, guys. I feel like I am not responding to questions, and I apologize for that. I think it's this Q&A function. Anyway, feel free to throw anything in the chat, you guys. I really don't mean to skimp over you with the hand raising at all. So kind of speaking to the people component, and I'm not really going to talk much about the vision component tonight because what we're here to talk about is accountability. And so those are the primary functions that I want to touch on tonight. Most people have a vision, and most consultants would actually have you start with the vision, right? If they would have us get the vision all out there. But in EOS, what we actually start with are some really core tools that create accountability or traction first, so that when we're ready to clarify and roll out our vision, we have some really basic and core management tools in our belt that help us make these things meaningful. One of those being really getting things clear for our people around their role. So we talk a lot about right people, right seats, but what's missing for a lot of people is understanding what they're really responsible for and how that will be measured, how we measure their success, what is the measurable around their role. So a lot of team members, we will provide really detailed job descriptions for, where we tell them 100 tasks they're responsible for, but they don't fundamentally understand the impact of that role or what we're ultimately looking to them for. A simple example of that is there's a really big difference between telling somebody they've got to make 30 recare phone calls a day versus helping them understand you're responsible for patient retention. One of your core accountabilities is retaining your patients, right? I think it feels a little different to utilize your tools, really get involved in understanding the tool of Lighthouse or patient communication software, really develop a patient retention system and really feel positive about outreach to patients, and instead of it feeling like a drudgery task to contact patients, it feels like I do this because I'm responsible for retaining patients. And so that's just a tiny example of the way framing what people are really responsible for and the handful of things that we're really looking for from them. And then adding to it the way that we measure that, right? So what are the measurable components for that same person? This is an example. We do this in an accountability chart in EOS. Example of that same position for my person who's my hygiene coordinator, right? If she's responsible for patient retention, her measurable might be attrition or patients reactivated. There'd be a couple of things that I can look to and measure. And wouldn't it be great if he or she understood the number they could look at to know their performance? And if we could discuss their performance around something that was measurable instead of a feeling, right? So it's don't underestimate the value of clarifying what you're really looking for in that role, and consider possibly creating an accountability chart. And if you need, I have examples of things like this, or if you want resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you guys out in any way that I can in terms of getting off that hamster wheel of missing accountability. The next tool that is very, very helpful and I would recommend using is something that we call a scorecard. So taking those measurables that we talk about that define if the people in our seats are effective in those seats and putting them on a scorecard. So you may, if you're a small practice, have a practice scorecard. You're a large practice, you may have a leadership scorecard, and then departmental scorecards, where we're looking at different numbers for different groups of people. The difference about this scorecard is that this is not just meant to be a report that we pass around. So many practices, even ones that are comfortable looking at numbers, have a meeting where they look at the numbers, right? Or they do this big numbers report and they review the numbers. And I'm going to tell you 9.5 times out of 10 that I observe those. I watch teams just deer in the headlights. They don't really understand what to do about these numbers. And a lot of times the people leading these meetings don't always know what to do about the numbers, or certainly they're not communicating what we would like done about the numbers. It's just a bunch of data. It's just a bunch of reporting. And so we don't just record these numbers, we look at these numbers weekly. And doing that does two things for us. One, we can start to see the trends. We can see when our new patient numbers dip here, our doctor schedule lightens up here. We can get predictive in our numbers so that we can start to take action earlier, right? And we can start to prioritize. Almost every dental team member I witness in an office is busy all the time. The problem is they're not always busy with the right or most important thing. They lack the ability to prioritize, and largely because they're lacking any data that would indicate they should reprioritize. They're just trying to do their stuff the best they can. And so if you can implement a look at your data on a weekly basis and determine that when something is off track, we have the opportunity to course correct. What do we do about this? It's incredibly powerful, even on a big parent level in a big organization. This is amazing. But where it's like really beautiful is in your average single basic office, right? Our normal, regular single 1 or 2 doctor practice, when you can show a team that when this last week's production was a little bit off target and next week's production isn't to goal, you know, what we should do is take action. You know what? We have got to turn the ship here, you guys. We've got to switch it up. We've got to start focusing on unscheduled treatment instead of making goodie bags for the health fair next week, right? We have to be able to make those determinations. And a lot of times teams don't have eyes on this stuff. They don't understand that they can make those switches or that they should. And managers aren't looking at it frequently enough to be making those directions. So using that data and using those measurables more proactively and more predictively is a huge shift in driving some accountability. Or accountability to me isn't just doing the thing I told you to do, right? It's doing the things that we count on you to do because you understand your role and you understand what we're trying to get done. And so for managers to be able to say, hey guys, you know, these measurables, these key metrics are off. We're not doing good. We've got to shift gears. We've got to focus in on these things. It makes it easy for people to understand why they're being put in a new direction and why that changes all the time, right? And those are the conversations we sometimes avoid as leaders because we don't even know how to frame what we're asking for. And sometimes it's just not even on our radar to ask for it.
Sometimes it's better to get ahead of it than let it continue for so long.
1000%. I mean, you know, especially with things like your production, right? It's so much easier to fix it a week in, right? Like to catch up $10,000 is much easier than catching up $100,000. And once you're way below, it's, you know, you're digging yourself out of a big hole. And so just being able to make small moves frequently and reprioritize and be that nimble is really powerful for practice results, right?
Yes.
And then really one of the final components of this is that traction element, which is really, this is kind of the magic, right? So there's two things that really can drive a lot of traction in your practice. One is the practice of setting rocks or a 90-day goal. So a lot of practices have a goal in mind for the year. Sometimes it's not even verbalized to the team, right? It could be a financial goal. The owners or managers can have a handful of things they're hoping to get done sometime this year. We kind of put that out there, or our goals are as simple as like, yeah, we like to do around this much a month. You know, they're really vague. They're not very specific. And so despite the fact that everybody's working hard, we sometimes go long periods without really moving the bar. You know, we kind of stay the same for a long time. And there's lots of things we can do to break through that. But one of the simplest is to sort of set yourself in this 90-day world where you create a lot of focus around a few important things. So instead of, you know, advancing 100 footballs 1 yard, you know, you're scoring a few touchdowns. And that is a huge difference in terms of what can happen over the course of the year. Because if you can hone in on a few important things every 90 days, you're going to start to have years where you can't believe how much you got done. And the reality is that as adults, we're not good at staying focused much longer than 90 days. That's about as long as we really stay motivated around something. So if we can build in the habit of setting 90-day goals, revisiting every 90 days, did we make it? What was our progress? What did we learn from not making it? What are we focusing on now? It's incredible, especially when you can get it not just across your leadership team, but down to every person in your organization. It's insane what can be accomplished in 90 days. The other thing that we need to implement alongside having that focus of a shorter term goal is a meeting pulse, which we like to call we call the meeting pulse, but we use a tool called the level 10 meeting in EOS. And this is another tool that I can send you or direct you to. And I want to walk you through this agenda because it's really takes into play a couple of these tools that we've talked about here, but you can see how having some structure and some format and a system to our communication and our accountability can really drive great results. And so this meeting is meant to happen weekly. And I think sometimes when I say, I want you to have a weekly meeting in a dental office, people are like, are you insane? But here's the reality. Human nature is that if we have this meeting tonight, you guys, and I assign you all a couple of to-dos, and we get together again in a month, you are likely to complete those to-dos the day before we meet, maybe the hour before we meet, right? That's what we do. We always wait until the moment that we have to do it, right? It's the procrastination curve. It's just human nature. There might be like one or two of you weirdos who do it right away. Most of us will do it the last minute before the next meeting. So if you can imagine that whether we meet now and we meet today and then we meet again in a month, you'll do that one to do the day before. If we meet again in a week, you will do that same to do the day before. So if we meet every week, you're basically getting 4 times as many things done in any given month. And so while it seems like, oh my gosh, this huge investment of time, if you could imagine that, like, as a result of having this 90 minutes every week, you accomplished every goal you had, you hit your production goals, you exceeded them, you could squash problems, your communication with each other would be healthier and more productive, it starts to feel very worth it. And I can tell you from the practices that I have implemented this with, which is a lot of them, I've had people resist it initially, and I've had people say it's meant to be a 90-minute meeting. I've had people say, there's no way we can do 90 minutes, we'll do it an hour. Of all of the people I've done this with, I've never had anybody stop doing it. I've never had an office quit the level 10 meeting, which is a pretty good testimony for it in and of itself, right? And what I always find is that they start with an hour and then move to 90 minutes because they can see the value of good communication, remaining aligned, and driving accountability around results more than pays for itself in that time. So with that said, let me give you a crash course on the level 10 meeting. And then I'm happy to kind of dive back into any of these tools and answer any questions you might have about them, or any questions you might have around traction or EOS in general. So the level 10 meeting agenda goes like this. It's meant to be a meeting that starts on time and ends on time, and it happens the same day, same time every week. So Monday morning at 8 a.m. or imagine Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. You're giving yourself 90 minutes. Now, depending on your team structure, the people attending this meeting might be a little bit different. So in a larger office, or an office newer to this, or an office that has a leadership team, it might start with just the leadership team having this meeting. And in fact, that's the most important group of people to be having this meeting. And some offices where there really isn't a leadership team, or it's a doctor, office manager, and a whole team, they'll do this as a team meeting every week. And other offices where you're a big office and maybe you have more departmental setups for management, you might have a leadership meeting, and then you might have a front desk or treatment planners level 10, or the doctors might have their own level 10, or the clinical team might have their own level 10. financial team. You could imagine it goes a lot of ways, right? The point is, regardless of the team meeting, this agenda is very effective, and it's especially effective over time when everybody understands how this is supposed to go and starts to realize the results possible from following this agenda. So we start on time, and right on time at 9 o'clock, hopefully everybody's already seated around the table. Whoever's leading the meeting basically starts with this segue, and they say, okay, everybody, good news. And once around the table, we share good news, personal and professional, just a simple something good happening for you personally and professionally. And it's not meant to be a big, long story about your weekend, but just a great way to stay connected with each other, start on a personal note, and be in the loop about the good things happening. It also starts you in a really positive place by focusing on something good happening. And you'll be surprised that for some people, that's actually hard to come up with at first. But when you can do that every week, it sort of gets you flexing that gratitude muscle. And it starts to really build more of a positive mindset where you can always think of something good. This is a little bonus that happens in 5 minutes at the beginning of that meeting, right? Absolutely, we'll be sending out the recording, Jeanette. So we will start with the segue, 5 minutes. It can't go longer than that because we really have to stay timely for this meeting to be effective. Then we're going to review that scorecard. So our 5 to 15 numbers that give us a good indication that we are in a healthy and good place as a business. So we run through that scorecard, and this is important. We're running through in a reporting fashion, simply stating whether or not the numbers are on track or off track. If they're on track, we don't really need to waste time talking about it. If they're off track, it can be tempting to talk about it and get into a discussion about why, but what we're going to do is actually take that number and drop it down where it says IDS here. This is where we're going to start to build our issues list. So this can be done on a whiteboard. We can do this on a living Google document, however you guys work, whether it's more pen and paper, or some people do it on a flip chart, other people do it on a big computer screen. Doesn't really matter as long as you take that number that's off track and drop it down to your issues list. The goal of the first part of this agenda is to build our issues list, build the list of things that we're talking about today. So we run through that scorecard, really important that you don't get sidetracked. We're simply saying on track or off track.
Now, if you are ahead of track, do you discuss that in that scorecard section?
That's a perfect question. Actually, sometimes if you're way ahead of track, it's worth discussing, right? Like, what is going on here? We should learn from that. Can we replicate that, And so just because we're calling it an issues list doesn't mean we can't drop something that's good down. These are things that we should talk about. So sometimes issues are also opportunities, right? And we can definitely drop those down. You could say, wow, that was an awesome week. Let's drop that down and figure out what was going on there. You drop it down. And then we go to our rocks list. So that list of focused list of quarterly goals that we set, for ourselves as a team, we run through them and we say, and those, by the way, those rocks need to be very specific, very measurable things, not like try to do more Invisalign. That's not a rock. A rock would be complete 10 Invisalign cases, right? Or I should say start 10 Invisalign cases, or do 20 Invisalign records, or whatever the case may be. We have specific rocks that we can say yes or no to, meaning, are we on track or off track with this rock? If we are on track, fantastic. If we are off track, we have to drop it down to the issues list. And if we are off track, and if a team member says they're on track and they're not, it's our responsibility as a team member trying to help them out to say, actually, I don't think we're on track. Let's drop that to the issues list. We're just going to move stuff down there. And then let's see, I've got a question.
So Amanda actually has a question. She wants to know if the scorecard is different than the rock list.
Yes. Yep. So the scorecard would be a metrics list. So a list of KPIs that we put into a spreadsheet that we visualize all next to each other. And I can click back to that in just a second and show that to you. The rocks are a list of 90-day goals that we've set that are specific and measurable. So scorecard are sort of a weekly flush out of our numbers. They're a reporting of measurable things in our office. And the rock review is something we're focusing on to get done in this 90 days. And so when we run through the rock review, we're simply holding each other accountable to stay on track. You can think of the rock review almost like a Weight Watchers meeting, a 5-minute Weight Watchers meeting, right? So we could all say like, oh, we're trying to eat less, or we can go to a meeting and weigh in. And that's kind of what it's like. You have to look at your team and say that you're on track or off track with this thing that we all agreed was important. And that's where that sort of team or peer accountability starts to come into play. Peer pressure, if you want it, I call it really positive peer pressure, but we want to deliver for each other. And it's hard to look at each other and say, I'm on track when you're not, right? And the whole point of it isn't like to have a big confessional. It's to say, if you're off track, the whole reason we're having this meeting every week is to sort out things and not get off track and determine where we need help and where we need support for each other. So there's no shame in saying off track. It's honestly, the earlier you admit it to yourself, the more likely you are to complete that goal.
So there's a follow-up question to it.
Yes.
Scorecard is the tasks or processes to reach the rock, trying to find the connection.
The scorecard and the rocks actually don't have much to do with each other. So the scorecard indicates to us if the key functions of the business are on or off track. So things like on our scorecard would be our production, our collection, our number of new patients that we've seen, production scheduled for next week. What are our patients reactivated, or number of attempts to patients look like? There's different things on different people's scorecard, but some people will put an indicator on their scorecard that might be supportive of a rock, but really rocks are more like quarterly objectives or focus that we're looking at. So an example of that might be where we want to do more Invisalign, right? And so the rock would be like, have we started enough cases to say that we're on track with this? If you wanted to then add that to your scorecard, you could say, number of consults this week or number of cases this week, which sort of would support that you are on or off track, but not every rock will necessarily be reflected in your scorecard or vice versa. We're driving a few questions around that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So once we run through rocks and say on track or off track, we drop those down. Then we run through customer or employee headlines. So patient or employee headlines. Did a patient have a 50th anniversary? Did a patient die? Is one of our team members pregnant? And it's really just somebody get engaged over the weekend, any of those things. But it's also, again, meant to be quick. So a headline, like this is what happened. If there needs to be much further discussion, you can either say, and actually I need to talk with you about that offline. So you and I know we need to connect about it. Or you can say, and actually we're going to have to figure out a plan for a baby shower. Let's throw that on the issues list. Or we're going to have to, come up with a maternity plan leave. Let's get that on our issues list to cover at some point. And you can just drop it down.
Okay. So it's kind of like a life event.
Yeah, it's just stuff that you can almost think of it as announcements, right? What's the stuff we kind of all need to know? It's the FYI section of like, heads up, here's stuff that's going on. Mm-hmm. And then we quickly recap the to-do list. So every meeting, we're going to produce to-dos. So we're going to take a look back at the to-dos from last week and simply say, are they done or not done? If they're done, great, they're off the list. If they're not done, I usually just say, will it be done next week? And if the answer is yes, then I'm not dropping it to my issues list. I'm not going to bother with it. If it's been on there for 2 weeks, it's an issue. We've got to drop it down. What's going on? Why can't we get this done? What do you need help with? Who do we need to bring in, right? Just moving it down. If we get through that all nice and quickly and efficiently like we should, we're going to do ourselves the huge favor of giving ourselves 60 minutes to talk through that issues list. And here's the beautiful part of it. We can now take a look at that list in its totality and start with the most important ones instead of our typical meeting where we address things in the order that they come up, right? And if when we address things in the order that they come up, we often run out of time before we get to the important one, right? So I've been in team meetings where we talked about who's supposed to take the garbage out on Thursdays and how we're going to make that fair. And we wasted 45 minutes on something that has really no significant impact on the actual practice or business. And then, oh, by the way, our schedule's falling apart. We need to talk about those things that are most important first. So we take a look at the issues list. And as a group, we say, what are the top 3? And we start there. Move them to the top. You put a dot by them, however you want to do it, a 1, 2, 3. And in this fashion, even if you only get through one issue, you talked about the most important issue. But if you get through all 3, then you pick the next 3. And so you're constantly prioritizing where you're giving your time and attention, and you're building the habit of discussing the most important things first. And in so doing, teams leave meetings feeling like, wow, that was a really productive meeting. We really sorted out a lot of stuff. And anything we don't get to is they're waiting for us next week, because we're meeting again in a week, right? So it's not like we're ever really leaving it. And what's funny is sometimes you come back to it the next week and it's not even an issue anymore. It's been solved, it's gone. We sometimes don't remember what we even meant by it. Stuff goes on there and we're like, what is that? You can also throw other things on the issues list, so like if you have something that didn't get flushed out in the top part before you get started, you can say, one more thing I'm going to get on the issues list is this, and then you can rank them. The other aspect to discussing issues in that level 10 meeting is that we use a concept, and it says here on this agenda, IDS, which means identify, discuss, and solve. And very simply put, what we need to do is build the habit of not politicking and arguing when we discuss things, and not just discussing them in a discussion loop only to discuss them again in a week, but really identifying what the issue is, meaning what is really the issue. Sometimes you have to dig down on that question a little bit, but if you don't start with a clearly identified issue, it's very hard to have a productive conversation about it. And by that, I mean, sometimes what's on there as an issue is a symptom of the issue, right? Is it what's been flushed out or makes that list is not what the actual issue is. And so we have to say, okay, what's the issue here? Make sure we're clearly all talking about the same thing and agree what the issue is. Then we discuss, and by discuss, I mean, everybody gets really one shot to sort of say their piece about it. Here's what I think about it. Here's my perspective on it. Here's an idea I have about it. Some issues won't really pertain to you, and you can say, I don't have much of a weigh in on this one. And then you have to move to solve it. And usually the solve it looks a lot like a couple of to-dos being made, right? Okay, so let's start with this. Ashley, you're going to do this. I'm going to do this. Sue's going to do this. And we make some to-dos, right? We move things to action. And the beautiful thing is that when you get good at and comfortable at moving things to an action, you can also get comfortable that it might not always be the right action. And that's okay. That it's better to make a move than it is to just discuss and debate and discuss and debate. The good news is we have a really good and really sound system for flushing out an issue if what we're doing isn't working, right? We'll know about it. And we're meeting again in a week, so we can change our minds if we need to, right? It's kind of a beautiful thing. And again, leads to people leaving a meeting feeling like we're doing something. We're not just talking about it, we're going to do something. The other really great thing about this is that you can learn to have a system where you share feedback, where you get to say your piece, but that doesn't mean there's no C in here. We're not seeking consensus. A lot of teams get held up on the idea that we all have to agree on the yes. We all have to agree on what the solution is, and we don't. Actually, waiting for us to all agree on it and have consensus is actually really limiting to practice growth, and it's actually really harmful to practice culture. And if you can have the respect for each other to understand that everybody gets to say their piece, a decision's going to be made, we're all going to support each other in that decision and that action, and that sometimes it'll go your way and sometimes it won't, but we're all respect each other and we're all seeking each other's point of view. And initially, I think some people think that's a little bit touchy, but we live in that place of eggshells for so long in dental offices. And when you can get rid of that and, be confident and candid and open and honest with each other, the level of respect and the level of care for each other deepens so much more than when you're just avoiding upsetting somebody, right? That's not actually a productive or healthy team environment. So we solve as many issues as we can at any given level 10 meeting. We save the rest for next week. With 5 minutes left in this meeting agenda, we recap the to-dos. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. I'm going to get this done. And then we take a moment of pause to say, okay, based on the things we've discussed here, what messages need to be cascaded in our organization? You know, who needs to know what? A lot of times we get into meetings, especially by department or by leaders, we come to decisions, we're all planning to take action, and we make zero plan or discussion to communicate about that. And it's really important to build that habit of saying, okay, who needs to know what? Is somebody missing? Is this something that impacts another department? Is this something that we need to make sure the whole organization knows? You know, and how are we going to handle it? How are we getting that messaging out? And just building that habit of making sure that we're communicating about the actions we're taking is brilliant. You know, every office I go to, people are like, we just need more communication. Such a must like the most vague thing. But that's one of the things they're pointing to, is like they feel like they're not in the know. And so especially if you're the leadership team having this meeting, making sure that you're letting people know the things they need to know as part of your weekly practice is really important. And then at the very end of the meeting, you just once around the table, rate your meeting 1 to 10. And that's your another little built-in accountability for each other and your own process to sort of self-improve and self-correct along the way. And that is the level 10 meeting. It's a really, really incredible tool that will drive a lot of healthy conversation, really productive team meetings, and ultimately just a lot of accountability in your practice. And I have I've vomited it all out now. So I can now take questions about the level 10 meeting if you would like, or any of these components. And I just want to get this up while we let questions come in. This is my email. This is our website at Traction for Dental. I do this with 2 other amazing implementers, all of us from a dental background. You know a little bit about mine, but both Josie and Alyssa are hygienists by background. And, you know, we're out kind of on a mission helping to bring this traction concept, or EOS, into the world of dentistry. So is there anything you guys want me to go back to, or additional things around accountability, or anything we've discussed tonight that I can dive into a little bit while we have a little bit of time left?
Jeanette said she would love a copy of the accountability report.
Okay, absolutely, Jeanette. We can definitely make sure we get that for you. Pam as well. Okay. I'm gonna have to make a list here. Actually, I'm gonna just say, if you guys can copy down this email that's on the screen and shoot me an email, it will, then I will be accountable to get it to you. Instead of remembering the details of this chat. And we will be sending out a replay of the recording as well, to those that that maybe weren't able to attend, or for any of you guys who are here and would like to have a copy of it or share it with your team. It's amazing how quickly an hour goes by. I was almost worried starting, like, do I have enough here? All right, guys, if you have any other.
I want to say thank you again for letting us, Lighthouse, do this with you. We greatly appreciate everything that you've done.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I get obviously a little bit like weirdly jazzed about this stuff. And so I enjoy doing these, and I really appreciate people who spend their evening with me to learn more about things like this. And so just know there's resources out there, and, you know, we're here specifically to help dental practices get what they want. And, you know, if you guys need any support, don't hesitate to reach out for us. We actually also have a Traction for Dental Facebook group where we talk about a lot of these tools all the time. So if you're just an EOS fan, I would definitely join that. And it's a great place to have a discussion with other traction nerds like myself. All right. Oh, thank you, Pam. Thanks so much, you guys. All right. Well, we'll let you guys get to your evening, and thank you so much, Ashley. Always good to see you. Hopefully I'll see you at ADAM.
Yeah, I am hoping to be there.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.